Time to talk Knowles here at the Voice of College Football. We do this every Wednesday at 6 o'clock Eastern Time. Settle in. Before you settle in too quickly, hit that like button. You know you're going to like it, so you might as well just get that out of the way. Leave those comments and questions there in the chat. We're talking FSU. We got James Coleman on the line. Big Game James joins us each and every week. Catch him on Den Media Group, and we will drop the link in the chat. James, what's going on tonight?
Not much, man. Just chilling. Chilling on a Wednesday.
Absolutely. So, camp talk has been what we've been diving into every week here for the last few weeks. June is a big month. Anything that comes to mind over this past weekend or looking ahead to this coming weekend in regards to what's going to be big for Mike Norvell and the coaching staff?
Well, the past weekend they had their annual elite camps, mega camps, and then positional camps. So they had the quarterback camp. Obviously, Luke Cromenhawk, Tramel Jones, a bunch of the two quarterback commits, a bunch of other of a legacy guy. I believe his last name was Seymour. He came in. He's a 2026 kid, but it's a bunch of guys that came in. You're seeing them compete. You're seeing the wide receivers like Jamie French in the class of 2025. You're seeing Mike Mackay Danzy from out of Florida High, who's a highly touted running back. Also, Olympic level sprinter, potentially in the 400. Right now, he's the second fastest 400 in a high school range in the world, not just in the country, but in the world. So number one in America coming out of high school. Cam Davis, Luke, a bunch of guys just coming into town and getting a chance to see what the coaching staff is like, getting a chance to be coached at an elite level. They also have the big man camp. That was a week ago today. Just since the last time we had the show, just a bunch of different things have gone on. Guys have gotten some offers. People have got a chance to see up close and personal what some of the best prospects in the nation can do. And right now, Florida State is having guys say all the right things about the program in comparison to what we've heard over the last 5 years. One prospect left and said, hey, this is second to Georgia for him. And that's a pretty, now we may get the kid, we may not, but that's pretty good talk in comparison to where you've heard about the facilities not being up to par. They've been winning but losing. But I've always said what winning can do at Florida State is make it a more attractive place. And a lot of the things that people complain about go out the window when you become a more attractive destination. It's not hard to get to Tallahassee when you won 10 games and you're projected to be a potential playoff team and with a Heisman Trophy candidate, possibly ACC champion. So a lot of talk about their 2025. A lot of talk also about the 2024 class, how it will shape up. When are you going to get some commits? Who's going to finish this class? Who's going to make it? But all in all, it was exciting from an activity standpoint, but I know a lot of fans want to see commits, and we haven't seen those in a while.
Yeah. Well, we also see this go on and on and on with different programs. And obviously, I do a number of these shows, and so I can kind of weigh these against each other. Miami, I know it's a bad word, but they had a nice class last year, and they didn't stack up too well until mid to late summer. Oklahoma finished with the top 4 class in the country. They were in rough position and suffering from 3-star paralysis at this point, and they worked through that and started to get big commits and worked out well. So yeah, the fans are impatient, but the relationships, most of these guys, even though they may feel really comfortable and good about a certain situation, they're going to take their visits, and they should. I would. This is an opportunity to be wined and dined unlike any other time, and just experience things that you're not going to have a chance to experience and haven't to this point in life. So why not go for it? And we'll see where we stand in 2 months.
And I think that's the big thing. I get a chance every day to see about. I think we have about 12. We have 12 kids on our team that have Power Five offers right now between three classes, and a lot more is going to college. One in particular that everybody just automatically assumes is a layup, even though they do have a really good shot at him, would be Jamie French. And we were just talking about how on, I believe it was Thursday, he was at Alabama camping, and Nick Saban put the pressure on him, put the thumb on him. Let us finish up our class, do this. And I'm telling him that this is the only time you're going to ever be in this position. Enjoy it. I'm not telling you don't commit early. I'm not saying you got to take all 5 of your visits, or actually more than that now because the NCAA rules. But what I am saying is make sure you're sure and use it as an opportunity to do some things you've never done. I mean, if it were my son in this position, we go to the West Coast because we don't go there often. It costs a lot of money to go to the West Coast, so we're gonna have somebody pay for us to go out to either LA or Oregon. We'll Midwest. There's some really cool. You got to see I think the Midwest is a cool layout in comparison to what you see in the South on a day-to-day basis. But whether it's Columbus, whether it's going to Michigan State, where you can get a chance to probably go see more Detroit, even Notre Dame. Notre Dame, you're going to stay in Chicago for more. You're going to find Chicago and at least stay there more than likely. So those are things that you get a chance to see that you don't see on an everyday basis. And even I'll say this for my Miami fans, I mean, listen, you're going to stay in the Ritz-Carlton. They're going to pay a lot of money for that recruiting experience. Go do it, and then go see the places that you actually do want to see home. But if somebody's going to pay for it, you might as well do it, because when you do commit, you're going to be held to a standard that's different. Also, see other places, because what people always forget is the dark side of recruiting. The dark side of recruiting, I've seen this happen. They pull scholarships every day. So, like, you could be prepared to go somewhere, then all of a sudden somebody else comes in and it's still a numbers game. They don't recruit only 25 guys. They recruit about 200 to 300 guys that have serious offers. What happens if no fan base ever asks, what happens if everybody commits that gets an offer? Do we hold the school to the same standard? Because they can't. You can only field so many. So those are things that I like to tell the guys to like pay attention to. And well, my bad. My bad. I'm just saying on the geographical map, I saw a guy say snow nowhere near. That lets you know us Southern boys don't go to the Midwest very often. I have no idea where the hell Detroit is in relation to Michigan State. The point is, go see the world so that you can learn that. But Florida State, we're in a position to get a lot of guys, but these kids are going to test the waters right now. And then we got a kid, Jeremiah Smith, that is going to come see us on June 20th, if I remember correctly. He'll be there June 20th through the 22nd. Then he'll go to Miami. Then he'll go to Penn State. It's an Ohio State commit. The flip side of recruiting is we would hate if that shoe were on the other foot, but we love the fact that we potentially could flip an Ohio State commit. So you have to realize the only thing that's more all over the place than trying to figure out what 17 and 19-year-old boys are going to do is what 30 to 55-year-old men with millions of dollars on the line are going to do. So I always tell people, just enjoy the ride, make a fan of it, and covering the NFL as well. Realize you don't want to make enemies with a kid that you may not be cheering for on Saturday, but you may be cheering for on Sundays. So it's an incredible time for him. But there are some things that I do understand why fans have a little bit of a little wary, because our defensive end recruiting hasn't been, from a prep perspective, hasn't been the greatest. And our even though I think our linebacker recruiting is getting better, and our D tackle development has been so good that I think it's kind of overshadowed the recruiting aspect of it. But I think Norvell one thing I will say is Norvell has a plan. And the plan the plan seems to be selling out for this 2023 season. In 2024, they'll probably go again, shop heavy on the D line and the portal, and really go all out for that 2025 class.
William, thank you so much for the super chat. Appreciate you. Go Noles. Beat Miami. So, James, if you're checking out one of these camps, and I know you have both, probably as an alum, but also in terms of covering them, you got football players who are going to have to run into each other, but they're wearing shorts. And, certain positions obviously are a little bit more legit in that situation than others. I got to think that the guys with the ball in their hands, it's a little bit more legitimate to watch quarterback wide receiver play, but then the guys covering the wide receivers and how that matchup works, then you've got all the positions to evaluate. So if you're circulating in a camp, what's going to stand out to you? What are you looking for?
Well, what I'm looking for is it's a few things. Nonverbal communication. Who looks like they are ready to compete, willing to compete. So you have to always do that. And there's some guys you see cower to the back. The alpha males, the alpha dogs always seem to get more reps. Like I always tell kids when they're like, there was a lot of people I didn't get the reps. And I'm like, well, that just means you didn't cut somebody in line. I'm going to get as many reps and dominate as much as I can. And then who's aggressive? I know they're not in pads, and there's a lot of things that you can kind of cheat with. But like you can see guys who play pad level, guys who have a propensity to hit, even if you're in shorts because it's a physical game. In particular on the O line, D line, like O line have a better advantage when there is pads, but if you go out there and you're chin checking people and you're getting up under their armpits, it's pretty conducive and relative to what you're going to be, what you're going to have to do in pads as well. From a DB or wide receiver perspective, it's a lot of hand checking and things going on. Quarterbacks is tough. It's tougher to see because it's easy to throw in ideal conditions. It's different when you got 275, that 275 bearing down coming behind you or in front of you, and you got to be able to take a step to the left or up in the pocket and then throw it. So, but it's really just seeing who's willing to go out and compete. And you could tell it's not just all the rah, rah, rah and talking. It's who's going out there and can back it up and who elevates around the other guys. That's really what I would be looking for is the guys who stand out from the pack. And it's a way to do that contrary to popular belief. And that's why the elite camps are a little bit better because there's, you're talking about 100 to maybe 150 people. And that sounds like a lot, and it is. But when you break it down over 10 position groups, that's average of 10 people. You can get seen with each group. Now, the mega camps where there's a lot of people there, you still want the same thing. Who are the guys who are being overly aggressive and who are making the most of their opportunities?
James, the chat's coming in here hard early. Williams says, I think Mike Norvell should think real hard about firing John Papuchis. He just lost a big position of need to Stanford, a guy that we were going to run down here, in Dylan Stevenson, who was a top 25 to 30 edge guy out of Miami Columbus, who went to Stanford, top 150 to 200 player in the country.
Fire, tough. How do you fire a guy that's going to run back-to-back first-round draft picks at defensive end? There's two things that happen in recruiting. There's development, and then there's two things that come to coaching. There's development, and then there's recruiting. Every coach on your staff is not going to be an elite recruiter. That's not what you have. What you have to do is identify who needs help and who doesn't. And one thing I'll say about JP, between having Jermaine Johnson, you've got Jared Versus, projected top 15 in the next year's draft. You got Patrick Payton, current ACC defensive rookie of the year, going to be a pretty good guy. And then just a bunch of other cats there. I think what we're doing as a fan base is the same thing that we've done since Mike Norvell has been there. The defense is the easy mark. Like everybody hates Fuller, but the numbers from either the analytics from the nerds and just in general don't match the hate that Fuller gets. Fuller had a top 15 defense. He's considered a top 5 DC based upon last season. And a lot of people right now are talking about the safety depth, the lack of safety depth. Like any school in the nation, if they're down to their third safety, wouldn't be in trouble. Like if we're down to our third string safety, I'm just like, all right, we got a bad, we've had a bad injury bug and bad luck there. Even Georgia, even Alabama aren't as deep as you guys perceive when it comes to that. Yes, they've recruited well, but the threes aren't getting the reps that are necessary during the season to be that good, because there are three for a reason. But I think Papuchis, if you look at him, he's too deep, and he's fine for the 2023 season. And depending on how these guys do in the 2023, they're going to be perfectly fine for the 2024 season. And what we've seen is we can address this in the portal. Jermaine Johnson, portal. Jared Verse, portal. And it is not done yet. You still have guys that are going to be good. Now, to speak to the kid that we just lost to go into Stanford, I think that was a thing where he didn't even realize Stanford was an opportunity until it came on. And that's just, everybody has their dream schools. He's a very, very smart kid, academic, and we lost out because that's something that Florida State has never really done a good job of selling, how good we are as academics for athletes. Florida State has a ton. I know we've got two. I know two Rhodes Scholars personally, in Garrett Johnson and Myron Rolle. Garrett was a track athlete. Myron obviously played football. And then there's tons of doctors, lawyers, engineers, tech execs, a bunch of guys who, presidents of hospitals that have come from Florida State football that I know for a fact. We probably don't do a good enough job of selling what Florida State football does for you while you're on the academic track that you want to be able to get. That being said, I learned a lot about Stanford. I didn't know Stanford had 116 total Rhodes Scholars, 4 of which are former athletes. So Stanford does a really, really good job with that. That Stanford education is second to none. And I know a lot and I'm gonna be honest with you. One, you got to win. I always tell kids it's the winning in life. West Point, Harvard, or any Ivy League school, in particular, like let's say UPenn. If you want to be in business, there is no other business school than what UPenn has. Like that is if you can get in, do it. But West Point, or Army, for those who don't know, one of the, not just from a military standpoint, from an academic standpoint, the creme de la creme. Same thing with Annapolis. Those are winning in life type of opportunities. If you get those and you kind of like football, okay, take those opportunities, play some football, but make sure you're secure for the rest of your life. Outside of that, I think every university offers great opportunities to network when you need those. But I don't think this kid is. I think this kid believes he has a chance to go to the NFL, but I don't think he's an NFL first type of guy. And I'm gonna be honest with you, as a fan and a former player, I don't want guys who aren't NFL first on my roster. So I wish that kid the best, but I wouldn't put that all on Papuchis. But I do believe he needs to work on his recruiting pitch, and we need to make sure we have off-field guys that are bolstering what he needs to do, because we haven't really had that. Ooh, that's a sexy guy. But remember, FSU fans was firing our tight ends coach not too long ago, and now he just had one of the greatest hauls from the transfer portal, and he's got the number 1 tight end in the nation with the potential another guy that's elite, and Kalen Fox coming in this class. So you never know how it's going to work.
That said, despite a pretty bad run of 5 years for Stanford football, they have produced NFL players. I would guess they're somewhere in the top 20 to 25 range. They're not in the Florida State range by any stretch, but top 20 or 25. Where was I headed next on this? I was headed somewhere. Oh, you bring up the academic standpoint of this, and Florida State may be selling themselves short or just not emphasizing that with the right prospects in mind. We took that deep dive a couple of weeks ago on Florida State, and for as top of the line as an elite as the Big Ten is considered academically, and it is. Florida State pretty much, it's not like Florida State, if they, the school joined the Big Ten, would be at the lower range of the Big Ten. It would be pretty much smack dab in the middle of the academic rankings within the 16 schools in the Big Ten, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, the law school is really good. Obviously, these are post-secondary educational things, but they're attached to what you do as a university. Our pre-med, med, especially when now that's being attached to Tallahassee Memorial Hospital, you're starting to become more of a research institution, which kind of puts you on par eventually down the road with what Miami's doing, what Florida does with Shands and a bunch of other different things. But again, I always tell we had this happen under Tag. What was his name? It was we lost a safety from the Maryland area who ended up going to Maryland, wanted to sign with Florida State in that 19 class. I think he got drafted this year, if I remember correctly. But his dad very academics, get family focused on that. But I will always the person that I will always have in terms of when I find out a kid really wants to do this is I'm having Myron on speed dial, and Myron will answer the phone and talk. And then there's another guy, David Castillo, who actually lives in Tallahassee, who is, Dr. David Castillo, who I played with. There's some guys that can tell you what it's like, how to do it, and how to transition with those things. But even guys even forget just that, your traditional, what we call the nerd type things. But look at what we're doing on the media side. There is nobody on the media side that's probably as much of a budding star as Brian McFadden when it comes to what he's able to do at CBS Sports on the NFL side, as well as the college side. Danny Cannell. Danny doesn't really come back and talk as much, but he's still one of the guys who's doing very, very well from a sports side. I would argue not necessarily good from an entrepreneurial standpoint. I don't think there's very many that are doing it the way that I do it from a media standpoint. And this is all stuff that's not structured, but I do believe if somebody's just a casual fan, they can see that there's a lot of connectioning and networking that goes with wearing that logo, wearing that Seminole spear on your shirt, especially in the Southeast. But I think we just don't do a great job of heavily marketing that.
And so attached to that is obviously the situation that we encountered a couple weeks ago. I've lost track of time, but Florida State was in that final 15, 16, 17 school range with AAU consideration in regards to that. I don't believe that the organization themselves unveils who they're considering, but the list of schools is out there uh, and talked about among certain media sites that follow that sort of thing. And Florida State was and continues to be. So, the door's not shut. The AAU added 6 schools in this round. Notre Dame and Miami have obviously the most the biggest brands from a football standpoint. But the last round was just in 2019. So, the Florida State missed the train here, but it's going to come back around and does a couple times a decade typically. But just your thoughts about Florida State, because obviously that's been a component that we've talked about in regards to joining the Big Ten.
Yeah, I think it's not a. I think sometimes we get as fans we get caught up in short term goals. This is a long term play. This isn't something. Again, I remember the first time that I heard about this was when we brought in our last president, where the goal was to make Florida State competitive as a flagship program in the state of Florida. I think it's South Florida. I think South Florida also got accepted as well. So we weren't, that sucks. But at the end of the day, we have to we got to look at this as a long play, and that's why you bring in the president that you bring in, and that's why you do the things that you do. So the goal is to get out of the ACC. That's really what the true goal is. And when you listen to what the president of the Big Ten came out and stated, he stated that being in the AAU is not necessarily a prerequisite to being in the Big Ten. So that is, kind of a breath of fresh air for guys who are banking on that. But things to consider: 2026 is when the next renegotiation, I believe, happens for the college football playoff. And that's, excuse me, not college football playoff. The next round of renegotiations, or the next check, kicks in for the Big Ten. So now you're going to see probably guys really establishing and going for that. This is clearly about money. Academics is dope and everything, but I've seen it numerous times on your show, Mark, and I love it. It gives me a chance to nerd out. Yeah, it's cool. People are making new finds and sciencey, but it's billions and billions of dollars on the table every year. So that's what they're going for, those research monies. And then there's millions and millions of dollars in the upwards to close to $1 billion when you look at it in terms of what athletics can bring, as well as the marketing side. Nothing promotes your university or can grow your university faster than athletics. And when Florida State started in 1980, one of the things they told us in my freshman intake, 1980, Florida State made a concerted effort to grow the university through athletics. And they want to make Doak Campbell Stadium the center of the campus. And that's what they do. And if you look at what Florida State looked at in 78, when Bobby got there, in comparison, forget that. Scratch that. If you look at Florida State in comparison to 2002, when I got there, compared to what it is now, it's night and day. I got lost. I went back in like 2010 and did a tour for some lacrosse kids at an FSU lacrosse camp, thinking that I can just walk around the campus. Had no idea where I was at, because there were buildings and places that weren't there before, or there used to be one building and it was knocked down and it's a dorm now. So, and College Town didn't even exist when I was there. So I think the AAU is still going to be on the table. That's something that they probably have in a 20-year goal, but it's not going to prevent anything. But congratulations to those who did get in, because now it just means Miami is more viable for us to move together if that was necessary.
James, I'm glad you brought up the statement made by the Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti, because I don't think maybe a lot of people realize how heavy that statement is. So he's a new commissioner. So when he makes a statement, he doesn't want to contradict what the presidents are thinking, their approach. That would be a PR nightmare if he was just going to go out there and make a statement and not be secure in what he was communicating. So for him to make that statement, especially as a very recent hire, just took the position in April, is a pretty bold statement to be able to say that is not necessary. That's not a necessary requirement. There is one school in the Big Ten currently playing football, Nebraska, that is not of AAU status. They lost their status while in the Big Ten. And based on what I hear, there's not a big pressure being put on toward getting them back into AAU status. So that's a good sign as well.
Yeah. I mean, again, I know as athletes and we're fans, most people are fans of the school. Not necessarily fans of a sport team at the school, and not necessarily fans of the school. But I have learned at how much money is on the academic side. It's a great shot in the arm what athletics can be. But when you even look at like University of Cal, they make $1 billion from the med school. I mean, from the medical portion, they make so much money that they have to separate it from the rest of what the university is making. So there are things that are coming on the way, but like it's just it is what it is.
Our buddy Jackson Johnson's checking in. Jackson, appreciate you being here. He wants to know worst case, best case for 2023.
Worst case is they're a 10-win regular season team.
10.
Yeah, 10 wins.
Okay.
Worst case. Because I believe it's a 2-game season in the beginning of September.
Aside from catastrophic injuries or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, even with like LSU, I believe we'll beat LSU. I believe we beat Clemson. That being said, it's not like you may walk in the parks. LSU's really good. Brian Kelly's a good coach. LSU has some talent. Clemson is the top dog until beaten. They're really, really good. All jokes aside, no matter how people feel about Dabo, Dabo is a great motivator of men, and he went and got that. Now I'm curious to see what's going to happen with the new offensive coordinator. Everybody knows that TCU offense is ran by their head coach, but that doesn't mean that he's not a good. That doesn't mean he's not a good OC. So I'm curious to see how that goes with that. I'm curious to see what what Cade is going to do, because we saw two different Cades. We saw a great Cade come in off the bench in the ACC championship, and we saw a not so great Cade when people had 30 days to game plan for him, or excuse me, X amount of days to game plan for him in a bowl game. So I'm curious to know what he will be like when the season starts. We'll know, believe it or not, we'll know a lot about Clemson with how they take care of Duke, because Duke returns a lot. Duke won a lot of games last year. Duke ain't the same Duke that we all know about, and they got a damn good coach who was there in his first year as well. But best case scenario, you're talking about a college football playoff team. Now, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I don't believe we beat Georgia, even if we make the national championship. Georgia is really, really good. But I do, when I look at what Georgia's able to do, and I look at what Florida State's able to do, I don't think we're going to get our behinds whooped like TCU got their behinds whooped either. But we'll see. It's a lot of talent. We haven't had this much talent probably since 12 to 13. Excuse me, but obviously, but you can maybe argue the 2015 team was talented, just didn't have the quarterback there. But Mike Norvell is still a young coach. This is year 8 for Mike Norvell, if I'm thinking correctly, as a head coach. Oh, no, he's had. Yeah, this is year 8 for Mike Norvell as a head coach. 4 were at Memphis, and 3 he's been on the job training. This is a pressure cooker. A lot of people are going to come in, and there are expectations. We had no expectations last year. We have many expectations now. What will we do? I don't know, but I know when I've seen them, I saw the NC State game. I think that was a lot of bad decisions on the head coach. Even though I think we should have won those games. Clemson, I believe there were some really, really bad coaching decisions in that situation. Now, you want good players to get you out of those situations, but at the end of the day, you never know. But I think the best case scenario is that. But I think there's enough depth and talent on this team to minimum win 10 games.
All right, James. I think that's shooting a little high, but I get it. Yeah, I just think that there are opportunities to trip up. So I'm more in that 12-0. They can beat anybody. More in that 8-4 worst case scenario, meaning they lose to the 2 obvious teams, then they trip up twice, and that's a low floor. Worst case scenario. I expect this team to be, well, I'll predict it sometime in August, but 10-2 would be my prediction right this second. But I'm going to give it a whole lot more thought than that.
I think if Jordan Travis gets hurt, we should be happy with eight wins.
Sure, yeah. And when I present a best and especially a worst, I'm thinking reasonable amount of injuries, not catastrophic injuries. So Travis is pretty rough on the crew here. Boy, love the show. Thanks, Travis. Entire defensive staff is questionable. Fuller is average at best, and the stats are misleading since we play in the ACC. Any team with a pulse on offense can move the ball with ease.
That's interesting. Hold on, let's see.
Well, in my estimation, who has a pulse on offense that they played last year? The best offense that they probably played. I don't think that there was an offense that you would say, okay, they're definitely the best. They're Ohio State, Tennessee offense, USC, but LSU, Wake. or
LSU,
those the
Wake,
two best.
Clemson, Florida, who everybody likes to pick on them, but they had the number 4 overall draft pick. NC
And
State
two
before,
excellent running backs.
yeah, NC
Yeah.
State before they knocked out the quarterback. Okay, let's go back. There's a lot of people. I think people are looking at this without. Again, he says the stats are misleading since we play in the ACC. When Florida State started, and we started the season, we said Syracuse had a draftable quarterback. NC State had a draftable quarterback. Wake Forest had a draftable quarterback. Clemson had a draftable quarterback. Florida obviously has a draftable quarterback. LSU has a draftable quarterback. I mean, do I need to keep going down the list? And it wasn't just that these guys weren't good, were okay. We're talking about some of these guys were on the top of the list, were Heisman Trophy contenders. Now, what did they do to LSU's quarterback who scorched the SEC the rest of the time with Booty, with all these other guys that were supposed to be the best guys? They held him to under 200 yards passing. He did get us with his legs, which were remarkable, but you held a guy under 200 yards passing on a lot of attempts, over 20 attempts. So what you did was you neutralized the guy who, if you're saying the ACC is weak, who went and ripped up the SEC, which we know is one of the best conferences. So by that, just that one argument, it destroys your argument. What happens is we hate Fuller because Fuller was not the first choice. He wasn't the first choice. He wasn't the second choice. He wasn't the third choice for Mike Norvell. And we stunk. And we also don't talk about the context of how many times, again, these are bad decisions, that Mike Norvell put him in a position where he went for it on 4th down on the other side of on our side of the 50. That is not traditional football things. And he stopped them. NC State being one of those times, or held them to 3 points. NC State, you score one American football point and you win the game. They scored one touchdown. And they were in plenty of situations where they should have scored more because they were put in precarious positions. Louisville, I apologize. Their quarterback,
Malik Cunningham, I was going to bring him up. Yep.
Dynamic. Before we sunned Boston College, everybody rang his praises. You can say, okay, well, yeah, the games got played and we saw they suck, but somebody had to make them look minuscule. So when you talk about people scored at will, and Louisville, don't get me in, let's not get started with the fact that they made sure that they held them off while we had a backup quarterback to be able to come in. Now, I'll say that I haven't seen anybody make as good of second half adjustments as I've seen Fuller make this season. Because even in the 3-game skid that we have with Wake Forest, North Carolina State, Clemson, if you look at the adjustments that he made against Wake Forest scored on the first drive of the second half. It did not score again until the end. And we had a chance to still win that game. I would argue we ran out of time because it was 21-28. We go down and score. We shut it down. We didn't. They go down and they ice it by kicking a field goal. That's what happened in that game. That's not me reading stats. That's me literally telling you what happened in the game. And we didn't score the points in the first half. The defense got put in a bad situation. And that's without Jared Verse for a half. That's without Fabian Lovett. Because people, again, context, we literally got depleted in the area that we couldn't do it, that we could not afford to have it done. I'm looking at a stretch. You can't, like, one touchdown was scored in in a stretch of 3 games. That's crazy. I don't care if you're playing the school of the deaf and the blind. It is very difficult to do that. What you have to stop doing is regurgitating talking points of a fatalistic beat that has to have somebody to jump on. I'm not saying actually, and I'll even go to your argument with this. Oklahoma's head coach, you know what he's considered? A defensive savant. Defensive savants, based on logic, don't get 35 points put up on them. Florida State did that to them. Florida's DC actually wasn't bad. He got 45 points put on him. Syracuse coach is considered an offensive guru. He scored 3 points. Miami had Kevin Steele, who is now the head coach excuse me, is now the defensive coordinator at the University of Alabama, has been a head coach everywhere. He got 45 points put up on him. Clemson got 28 put up on them, and they got a pretty good DC. I can keep going on and on, but my point is the goal is to win, to score more points than the other team. And even in LSU's national championship year, with one of the best defensive coordinators in the nation, defensive mind, now a head coach, they gave up 20 to 21 points at times against teams that were subpar to them. So what happens? Your offense sometimes has to bail you out. Bobby said this: a good defense can win you 8 games, but there's going to be 4 games where the offense is going to have to bail the defense out. Go look at our national championship team, not the record-breaking one in 2013, but go look at 99 and go look at 93 and some of those other teams. We've got games where we pitch shutouts. We've also got games that are shootouts that should not have been shootouts at that time. It's the other team. The other guys get paid a lot of money for a reason. Again, I hate to do that because I just don't like when people like, you got a top 15 deep. Be happy. Like, we haven't had that in a while. We went from in the 100s 2-3 years ago. Any guy who can take you from the 100s to the top 15 and you fire that guy, you would be considered a fool. That's all I'm saying. That's just that's stats and context.
Yeah, to extend on some of those points, because I was going to go the verse and love it route as well. And the counter argument or counterpoint to that might be, well, guys get hurt and you need to be good enough to overcome that. However, we're not talking about a fully developed program at an elite championship level. Georgia, Alabama, fill in the blank. There's only a few that are at that point. Florida State's still on that trajectory to get to that point. So when you lose your best guy, when you lose your best player on defense, lose your best interior defensive lineman, that's something that almost every team in the country cannot overcome. To your point about Brent Venables disappointed me last year because I do think that he's one of the best defensive minds in the game. And he went to Oklahoma and they had a bottom 10 or 15 defense in the country. And he was taking his existing players that performed much better than that. And they really had a rough year. And I would
argue better players than what Florida, like from top to bottom. They've been recruiting at a higher level than Florida State is recruiting, even during their down period. Lincoln Riley didn't leave the cupboard bare. He was a good recruiter at Oklahoma.
And I also think that even though there were a few injuries here and there, Devin Leary, Tyler Van Dyke, et cetera, that compromised ACC quarterback play, that going into last year, I thought it was by far the best quarterback league in the country. And it was the best quarterback league in the country in 2021. So Sam Hartman, Tyler Van Dyke, Malik Cunningham on down the line. It's tough to find a league better than that. And when the big non-conference game, the 2 big non-conference games, to your point, were against Jaden Daniels, who's arguably the best quarterback in the SEC. And then the other one got selected top 5 in the NFL draft. There's a lot of talent that they faced at that position last year. Wow.
I told people this, and here's the thing that people don't want to admit, because you look at records, which is funny because people will tell you don't look at stats and let them fool you, but then we won't look at records, which is nothing more than a stat. When Anthony Richardson wants to be a quarterback, I'll take that all day. When Anthony Richardson wants to play and be the best player on the football field, that is tough to stop. I said that before we played the game. I said if they go out there and run on us, that is the craziest thing. Is everybody talks about our secondary like that's our weakness, like the run, like not having 2 D tackles isn't like the weak part. People who wanted to run on us, Clemson didn't beat us in the air like that. They beat us on the ground. Their running back had a pretty decent game. I think that's just where, people, and then even with the big bombs, because Anthony Richardson went like 9 for like 17 or something like that. It was probably 9 for 27, excuse me. It wasn't even like that great of a passing performance. It was 2 deep plays, but again, context. And Akeem Dent literally tweaked his ankle in warmups. So we went from having a starting safety to having to play a guy who got none of the one reps. We played Shaheem Brown, who is the backup of Jamie Robinson, not necessarily the backup of Akeem Dent. So you got a guy who's playing a position that he didn't really get reps and practicing with. And you still came out on top. You still made some stops. You still did some good things. I think at a certain point, you just have to give props where it's due. And if you want us to play, if you want to say we should have played better at times, I agree with you. If you want to say we should recruit better, I agree with you. But a lot of times, like, look at who do you want to replace them with? That's what I always ask people. Like, which you want to replace them with? Oklahoma's DC? You want to put Alex Grinch is a bigger name than Fuller, but USC fans want to hang him. Like like the names that you would probably say if you go back and you look at where they're ranked and you look at their schedule and you look at the talent that they have. I'm cool with what I got. I'm cool with the consistency.
Jim Knowles got Oklahoma State to a top 5 ranking in defense 2 years ago. Ohio State threw more money at him than any D coordinator in the country, and he's got 5 stars. He's tripping over them, and statistically they were good, but they didn't perform in the big games, and he's got a lot of heat on him, and we'll see if he delivers this year. So there's a lot of guys that know what they're doing out there. It's like James says, the other guys get scholarships and get paid as well. So
if things happen the way Florida State fans believe it should happen and want it to happen, I'm going to present this one sometimes as a guy who's done it. Like Mario Williams was an MFer. Hard to hit. I won some battles. I lost some battles. I could tell my coach that's just a bad man over there. Like, it's hard to block that guy. He's the number 1 overall pick for a reason. Peter Ward, if I'm a DB, I don't care how good. Peter Ward went up against Dre Bly. He went up against a lot of household names. He made them look silly. But if we have what we expect to have, you have Johnny Wilson. He's 6'7", 220 pounds. He's probably going to be a top 3 round pick. Keon Coleman's coming in here from Michigan State. He's got over 800 yards. He's got an NFL draft grade. He got 2 NFL draftable wide receivers. I'm not even going to talk about the other guys, just those 2 guys. You bring in a Jaheim Bell, who is a good tight end, who also can flex out at a wide receiver. That's 1, 2, 3 targets. You have Trey Benson, who's one of the top 5 returning running backs in the nation. On top of that, you've got Jordan Travis, who's a Heisman Trophy contender. If they're as good as what we're thinking, I don't give a damn who the DC is. That's going to give a DC fits. You know what you do if you're a fan, and you cut this up, Mark. If you're a fan of another team that you cover, Mark, and you're playing Florida State and you give up 30 points, give that man grace. It's hard to stop everybody. There is no defense that stops everybody. That's what makes Georgia so good, is that Georgia has 5 tight ends that can start anywhere in the nation. They can literally line up in 32 personnel, which is basically goal line package. And if you bring in your bigs, they'll spread them out because all of those guys run 4.6 or better. And they're all 6'4" taller. And if you keep your small guys in there because you want people to cover them, they'll just go big formation and they'll just run the ball down your throat. And they can still run spread. It's hard to defend those things unless you got cats. And even then, it's still like you saw what happened with Ohio State, that's what made a good game. Is Ohio State's DC bad because he went up against Georgia? And they had him dead to right, should have made the field goal. Actually, if anybody should be fired, their special teams coach should be fired. I'm not saying he forced that kid to miss the kick, but damn. But it's just some of the things that I think people kind of look at. Sometimes it's catball, man. And you just, like, again, Anthony Richardson is a 4th overall pick. They didn't do that because he's a nice kid and he feeds the homeless on weekends. They did it because he did with number 4 over. I played against Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers was all that in a bag of chips. Phillip Rivers was cheat code. Like, I've seen what they can do, and I think sometimes and I love it. We got to have a standard. I'm one of the biggest proponents of the standard, but sometimes you do fall short of the standard. But the most important thing is coming out with that W. But I do think the 3 losses we had, I don't blame I don't blame Fuller for two of those.
But James, I think one of the big problems is almost all of us have a job in which there is nothing stopping us from doing a good job.
Mm-hmm.
If I come in here and I suck today, that's my fault. That's on me. Nobody stopped me from doing a good job, putting out good content. Unless the power goes out or the Wi-Fi goes down, nobody's grabbing the mic, pulling it away from me. No, nobody's stopping me. But when Deion Sanders is in his prime with San Francisco or Atlanta, and he's lined up against Michael Irvin on the Cowboys, somebody loses that battle. And they still may be the best in the league, but that's just the nature of sports. Somebody looks bad. You could have the two best teams, the two best coaching staffs, and when they line up, somebody's a failure when they walk off the field. They could have prepared their best, worked their butts off, and they're still a failure.
What happens when what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? I mean, it's just that's what makes it fun, though. Like, you gotta believe in yourself, and then you gotta put you have to put guys in great positions, and I think even when they were a top 100 defense, which isn't a good thing, I was looking at, okay, guys are in position to make tackles, but they just didn't make the tackles. And people would say, well, take them out and put in who? They just ain't have guys that can make tackles. You bring in some better talent, they get better. You bring in some better talent, the guys are still in positions. We'll see what happens this year. Now, it's hard to have a top 15 defense, but if there are noticeable things where guys are just blowing coverages and doing things like that, then I'm gonna be like, all right, man, hey, bro, you tripping. Same thing with Coach Norvell. I believe in being honest with what you're seeing and what the stats are, but I just can't fathom the Fuller hate, because right now, if you fire Fuller, he would probably be picked up at a rival, at one of our top rivals, and he would probably be making it a little bit difficult for us.
Folks, we got 120 on the line. We had 50 or 60 on the line for most of the show, so you know what that means. You got to watch what you missed. You missed a whole lot of good stuff, so keep it right here. The video posts automatically. Watch what you missed. James, tell us what's going on at Den Media Group.
Same trying to get to over 3,000 subs. We're at 21, almost about 2150 right now. Once we get to 3,000 subs, we will give away $300. Plus, once we get to 3,000 subs, I'm giving away 2 tickets to the LSU FSU game. That's about over $1,000 value if you look at what those tickets are going for right now. But we will do a live giveaway later on in the season once we get to over 3,000. Not in the season. Probably sometime in August once we get to over 3,000 followers. If we figure out how to get over 5,000 followers, I'll give away 2 sets of tickets to that game. But the biggest thing, too, is that we're promoting. We're doing my 4th annual book bag drive. Mark, I've appreciated you over the years, helping all the things we do in the community. I believe not Rising Spirit, Battles In will be a part of it with us, Seminole Boosters. I'm talking to a bunch of different people. Orlando's July 22nd. Tallahassee's 29th and the 30th. Jacksonville's the August 5th and 6th. We're going to get about 3,600 book bags. Each book bag is about $36. They get 9 weeks worth of school supplies, and they get a week's worth of food. So, if you can follow me at Big Game James _36 on Twitter. And it's my pinned tweet shows you how you can donate. And then there's a video that shows what we did with the Tallahassee book bag and food drive, so you can check that out. And then I think somebody asked about the tailgate. Tailgate tickets are $60. That's all you can eat, all you can drink. But we'll sell those more heavily after I get done with the book bag drive. I can't do but so much stuff, but the book bag drive is the main thing, and then just trying to get our subs up.
And what's the deadline on the book bag drive?
We're the first big buy I'm going to do is on July 18th. And then what we'll do is so July 22nd is Orlando. So after that, if we don't meet our goals or whatever, we'll recalibrate, see what we have left, and we'll continue to raise all the way up until probably August 1st will be the last time you can. I mean, you can donate whenever you want to, but we're gonna shut it down August 1st as far as raising that. And I get it. If you're in Orlando, Jacksonville, or Tallahassee, man, time, talent, treasure. I don't trust Red Cross and a lot of those people. That's why I'm raising the funds myself. A lot of people don't know me from Adam, but if you want to come see, please volunteer, or a retweet or quote tweet goes just as far as giving $36.
So, folks, James' Twitter handle's right there on the screen on the banner. And yeah, we've jotted down the deadline. And so just do it right now so you don't forget. Get on over there and follow James. And we will retweet that on my Twitter handle as well, so we can get that out and get, these kids prepared for school so that they can go and learn and not have to be held back by a lot of challenges and adversity in going to school this year. James, we appreciate you, man.
All right, man. Appreciate you, Mark.
We'll be back here, everyone, next Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern time.